Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into something that goes quite a bit deeper than just tricky people or, arguments. Psychological manipulation.
Right.
And we're not talking cartoon villains here. This is often way more subtle, harder to pin down.
That's spot on. What the sources we looked at show is that manipulators, they often construct these really complex systems, almost like building a separate reality to trap people.
A separate reality.
Yeah, it's often invisible when you're in it. So
Oh.
you're really tangled up.
Invisible prisons almost, because
Yeah.
the material really drives home how they use your own mind against you, doesn't it?
Absolutely. They weaponize your thoughts, your feelings. And yeah, the really insidious part, it often starts out feeling good.
Yeah, the sources mention that at first it feels like love. That's quite a hook.
It is, and it's crucial. That initial phase, it's all about laying the groundwork for control.
Okay, so let's dig into that initial phase. This intense connection, sometimes people call it love bombing. What does that actually, look like?
Well, the sources describe it as this overwhelming wave of attention, mirroring.
Mirroring.
Yeah, they seem to just get you,
Yeah.
like completely. Sometimes finishing your sentences or saying what you feel before you even articulate it fully, it feels incredibly powerful.
Like, wow, this person really sees me.
Exactly that feeling. This person gets me. And that feeling, that sense of being deeply understood, makes you feel safe.
Safe enough to open up.
Precisely. Safe enough to share the vulnerable stuff, your fears, your big dreams, old hurts. But here's the catch the sources point out. Underneath that empathy act, they're actually just collecting data.
Okay, so not genuine connection, it's reconnaissance.
You could call it that. They're mapping out, as the material says, your buttons.
They're buttons.
Yeah, what makes you feel guilty, your old wounds, your insecurities, maybe your blind spots, and they file all that information away for later.
Right. And this whole process, it doesn't just happen overnight.
No, the sources are really clear on this. Not all at once, not obviously. It's gradual, like erosion.
Which leads us into the next phase, right? This subtle wearing down of your self-worth. How does that actually play out day to day?
The sources give some pretty common and frankly chilling examples. Little dismissive comments.
Like what?
Things like, oh, you're too sensitive, or
Yeah.
you always have to make things so complicated. Maybe you're just overthinking it again.
Ooh, yeah. Things that on their own maybe seem small.
Exactly. Small digs. But when they're repeated over and over, they add up. They start to chip away at your confidence in your own feelings, your own perception.
Because they're constantly suggesting your reality, your reactions are wrong. So you start to second guess yourself.
That's the aim. The sources say you start adjusting yourself to avoid conflict, just to keep the peace, to try and protect that connection you thought you had.
But it's not a real connection anymore.
No. As the sources put it, it's a leash.
Wow, a leash. Yeah. Because you're basically being trained to put their feelings, their comfort ahead of your own instincts.
And once that leash is on, the next step often involves pulling you away from others. Isolation.
But subtly, right? Not like locking someone in a room.
No, nothing that obvious usually. The sources describe it perfectly. Not by locking you in a room, but by planting tiny seeds.
Seeds of doubt about other people.
Exactly. Little comments designed to wedge distance between you and your friends, your family, anyone who might offer support or a different perspective.
Can you give an example of those seeds?
Sure, things like, they don't really understand you. Not like I do. Or maybe, have you noticed you've changed since you started spending more time with them? It sounds almost caring, sometimes.
But the effect is insidious. It makes you question those other relationships.
It does. And the goal is that you slowly drift away from your support system until the manipulator becomes, effectively, your only mirror.
That sounds incredibly isolating and dangerous.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because it creates the perfect environment for the next stage, twisting reality and shifting blame.
Okay, so your support network is weakened, and now they control the narrative.
Pretty much. They can hold up what the sources call a broken mirror, this distorted view of what's happening, and then blame you for any issues, any conflicts.
So whatever goes wrong, it always circles back to being your fault.
Yes. The language used here is key. Phrases the sources highlight include things like, you're overreacting, still invalidating you.
Right.
Or the classic, you made me do this, completely shifting responsibility for their own actions.
Wow.
And maybe the most damaging one, you're always the problem.
And hearing that constantly, you start to believe it.
You internalize it. You become, as the sources put it, the apologizer, the peacemaker, the silent one, Always trying to smooth things over, fix things that weren't your fault to begin with.
Constantly walking on eggshells.
Exactly. Terrified of setting them off, of triggering more blame. And if that little voice inside you does try to speak up, that's often when fear comes in, big time, which is the next phase.
Right, the cage of fear. What kinds of fear are we talking about here?
The sources list some really potent ones. Things like, no one else will ever love you like I do. That taps right into the fear of being alone. Or, you'll be totally alone if you leave, doubling down on that isolation. And the threat, you'll regret leaving me, you'll see. Fear of making the wrong choice.
So leaving doesn't feel like an escape. It feels terrifying, like stepping off a cliff.
That's exactly the feeling they cultivate. Fear becomes this internal cage. Leaving starts to feel less like freedom and more like a betrayal almost of this messed up bond.
So your whole focus shifts.
Completely. It's no longer about living your life. It's about managing your captor's emotions. And in doing that, you start losing yourself piece by piece.
The sources paint a really bleak picture here. Your voice gets silenced, your dreams fade, you can barely think straight.
It's utterly draining. And the courses basically say the manipulator wins through this slow rewiring of your brain by turning your own trust into a weapon against you. But that's not always the end of the story.
No, thankfully. There's the next phase in the awakening, which really kicks that off.
It's often something unexpected, according to the sources. Just awareness. A moment, or maybe a series of moments, where the pattern suddenly becomes clear.
Like the fog lifting.
Sort of. You start questioning their version of things, you replay arguments in your head, but this time, something just feels fundamentally wrong. You see the cycle.
And that leads to a pretty huge realization.
A profound one. The sources say it's realizing you were never the problem, you were the target. And crucially, you were never broken, you were being broken.
Wow. Shifting from self-blame to recognition.
It's a massive shift, and it's a doorway to getting free. But it's not just about walking out the door, is it? It's internal work, too.
Reclaiming yourself.
Yes. Remembering, as the sources put it, who you were before they shaped your voice. Reconnecting with that authentic self. And that rebuilding takes concrete steps.
Okay, what kind of steps are we talking about? What does that rebuilding look like?
The sources lay out a few key actions, like speaking up again, even if your voice shakes, setting real, firm boundaries.
Hard boundaries.
Yes. And walking away from conversations that feel like traps, like the circular arguments. Stopping the need to explain yourself constantly to someone who just twists your words anyway.
And that point about feelings.
Crucial. Stopping asking for permission to feel. Your feelings are valid, period. You don't need their approval for them.
These are all powerful ways to take back control. And the sources also mentioned stop shrinking.
Yeah, stop making yourself small to accommodate them. Reclaim your space, physically, emotionally, and guess what? The manipulator usually doesn't like that.
They push back.
Oh, yeah. The sources say they will say you've changed, and they don't mean it as a compliment, and they resent that. They hate it.
Because their power is based on you being small, on you doubting yourself.
Exactly. Their old tools stop working. The sources point out their favorite tool, your self-doubt, no longer works. Silence doesn't intimidate you the same way. Fake kindness doesn't confuse you anymore. Fear loses its grip.
So what's the end result of all this? The awakening, the rebuilding?
It's powerful. The sources say you are no longer theirs to control. You are yours, fully. And the win isn't about fighting back with rage or getting revenge. It's about clarity.
Clarity. Seeing it all for what it was and knowing who you are again. That's really something. If anything we've talked about today has struck a chord with you, if it feels familiar, please know you're not alone in this.
Absolutely. We hope this deep dive into how manipulation works, these mechanics, maybe offer some validation, some clarity if you've been through something like this.
And if it has, maybe consider subscribing to the deep dive. Think of it as a tool, a place to come back to remind yourself of your own perspective, your own strength, your true self.